So we've looked at Sony's opening arguments for this. Now we're going to get into the theory of harm section, but let's look at their closing arguments. This is a huge document, so I'm breaking it into a multi-parter, and I have some rebuttals that just kind of point out that Sony's being a little bit ridiculous with a lot of their comments to the CMA. Go watch part one if you haven't yet, and then come back. I'll link to it in the description below, but let's dive in right now because this is a doozy. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you like my content, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell to know when it goes live. Thank you so much for watching. All right, we're going to dive in right now. So these are sort of their closing arguments for the first section. They continue on. To the extent that SIE has achieved a lead, this has been driven by its investments in the quality of its platform and competition on the merits. You want to talk about blocking a company's acquisition, you should really make sure you haven't been on a buying spree for the last few years. Just look in 2021 alone. AWOL, Evo, something else, Housemark, Nixie's, Crunchyroll, Firespite, Fabric, Bluepoint, Somlivra, Bad Wolf, Valkyrie, Ultra. Okay, we're in 2022 now. Lasengli, Haven, Bungie, Repeat, Right Stuff, Savage, Pixiemoto, and Beyond Sports. And they also made a heavy stake in the game engine company, Epic Games, and From Software. So to pretend like that's not something that you have done and that it's something that Microsoft can't do, I just think it makes your argument a lot weaker when that is your stance. Second, Microsoft's argument is particularly misplaced when looking beyond consoles and considering the impact of the transaction on the two other areas assessed by the decision. Multi-game subscription services, where Microsoft leads, and cloud gaming, where Microsoft has a well-established position. Multi-game subscription and cloud gaming are at an early stage of its development, and Microsoft's conduct could affect all current and potential rivals. So here's the thing, though, Sony. Your game subscription services lost 2 million subscribers, but you converted them to your PlayStation Plus Extra tier. So actually, when you look at your revenue report for the last few years, you can see that despite a decline in the numbers of subscribers, the revenues have actually increased from subscription services, as the revenue per subscriber is up 21% year over year, which is tied to the new subscription tiers that cost more than previous PlayStation Plus plans. That's referring to PlayStation's other tiers of subscription services. So again, their point is just moot because PlayStation has said, well, there's no way we could compete. You literally launched like the most basic combination of services and rebranded it, and you saw a 21% increase in revenue per subscriber, according to that article that I just read. So again, absolute nonsense. You can absolutely compete in the subscription market. Again, moot. They actually, believe it or not, there actually is some stuff in here that I do feel like Sony made a good point on. SIE is confident that the CMA's Phase 2 inquiry will confirm that the transaction is likely to substantially lessen competition and should be prohibited. Of course, Sony's going to come to that conclusion. I don't think it actually will substantially lessen competition. And you know why I don't think that? Because you wrote this whole document trying to stop the deal, which tells me you were scared that you're actually going to have to compete in better ways than charging more money for all of your games, having a subscription service without any day one games on it, not allowing people to just upgrade their games. You're charging them for $10. You've been posting record-breaking profits. So the idea that Microsoft buying this huge company is going to prevent you from continuing to offer your customers great value, it's ridiculous. And now we get into the theory of harm. Whoops. The theory of harm. Under theory of harm 1, the I don't know what the is short for, and decision explained that Microsoft would have the ability and incentive to withhold or degrade rival consoles' access to Activision's gaming content. You mean like you have been doing with Call of Duty, Final Fantasy. You did it with, what was it? Street Fighter V wasn't available on the console. You are actively blocking people from releasing their games on Game Pass or paying for exclusivity. It's not a new strategy. You're doing it, and you're mad because Microsoft's about to do the same thing to you, and you're going to have to compete. I want to make something really clear. I want Sony to actually be neck and neck with Microsoft, and I want Microsoft to be there too. I don't care if Microsoft bought their way there and Sony fostered all of these companies. I want to see these two behemoth companies and their billion trillionaire people, billionaire companies on Sony, trillionaires on Xbox. I believe they're in the trillions, right? Or Microsoft is anyway. I want to see them going toe in toe and pushing each other to do things differently in a better way. Sony has gotten away with a lot for a long time. They didn't treat their indie devs right. They had to make that right. They charged the crossplay tax. They had to make that right. They keep getting called on their nonsense. And finally, in my opinion, the chickens have come home to roost. Microsoft has the bankroll to stop getting stomped on by you, and they've thrown it down. Now, whatever comes of this, we will see, but that's for another episode. SIEs agrees with these findings and the framework for the assessment set on the decision and is. The decision reached its conclusions based on consistent, convincing, and compelling body of evidence, including Microsoft's and Activision's internal documents, views from multiple third parties. None of the third parties really said anything negative about it. If you look at the Brazil documents, so that point's a little moot. Revenue and user engagement data from Microsoft showing Activision and Microsoft's titles account for 30 to 40% of minutes played on console in the UK. Economic analysis and financial modeling, and Microsoft's past business practices. I don't really have anything here. This whole paragraph is Sony deflecting. Sure, they looked at those things, but the talking points were from Sony. Yes. So the reason I highlighted this was because all of the CMA's talking points were from Sony. We know what those other companies said. They said, we have products that we believe could compete on the market should this still happen for Microsoft. You look at Rainbow Six, you think you think Rainbow Six is suddenly just going to go away? I know Battlefield isn't as big, but like they're still working on Battlefield over at EA. There is a chance that another company could come along and someday be as big as Call of Duty. And PlayStation just says, no, that's impossible. I don't like that sort of attitude. I think it's a very weak attitude and a sad attitude. That's just saying like nobody could ever compete with anything, so never try anything. Okay, Sony, sure. Faced with this evidence, Microsoft retreats to three main points. It argues that Activision content is not particularly important. Yeah, Microsoft's full of shit. Pardon my language, but Activision content is hugely important. You don't pay $69 billion for a company that you don't think is important. And Sony calls them out. They're like, Microsoft is downplaying this. That's absolute nonsense. And Sony absolutely has you there. We get into some really interesting, oh my God, we're at 9 minutes already. We get into some really interesting stuff here, like the PlayStation 6 potential release date. So I'm probably going to read like one more page and then we'll go to part 3 for this. I don't know how I'm going to release these videos because there's so much to go over. Maybe, anyway, let's keep going. What matters is the importance of the content that Microsoft would control post-transaction compared to its competitors and how this would affect competitive dynamics over time. The reality is that the transaction would give Microsoft control. Would give Microsoft control of irreplaceable content that could in turn confer an extraordinary advantage and allow it to foreclose rivals. They're describing exactly what they did for Call of Duty. And I brought this up on the previous episode, but let me bring it up again. So if you remember what they have been doing with the Call of Duty franchise, they have exclusive betas, they have exclusive benefits for PlayStation players, they have exclusive missions in the original Call of Duty. That's fine to do that. The fact that Sony is upset about the fact that Microsoft would have the ability to do all of the things that they've been doing with Activision is nonsense. Microsoft would control irreplaceable content that drives user engagement. Post-transaction, Microsoft will control Activision content that drives X times as much user engagement on PlayStation than all of SIE's best performing first title parties put together. Of that user engagement is driven by Call of Duty. It's redacted, but sorry. I just read the top paragraph here, if you're curious what I was referring to. And what's funny is this is released on a day when Sony is talking about one of their biggest and best acclaimed releases of all time. Here's Herman Hulse saying, "Thank you all to all the PlayStation fans who made God of War Ragnarok the fastest selling PlayStation Studios game ever, and congratulations to everyone at Sony Santa Monica on this amazing achievement." It sold 5.1 million copies after its first debut week. That's insane. It's the fastest selling first party launch in their history, beating out The Last of Us 2. And it has set a franchise record. But if you look at what they're telling the CMA, they would have you believe that they just, they're just barely holding it together. They have to have Call of Duty. Otherwise, games like God of War that are their fastest selling first party games of all time just don't cut it. Sorry, God of War Ragnarok, you're not good enough. It has to be Call of Duty or nothing. Call of Duty gamers are exceptionally important to PlayStation, apparently. In 2021, X million PlayStation users played Call of Duty, accounting for around blank % of the PlayStation user base and spending X billion dollars on Call of Duty titles. I think we figured that out in a previous video. It's like 1.7 billion. I don't know. Somebody put that in the comments, but it wasn't as much as you would think. It's a lot, but it's even if all that revenue were to go away, as Microsoft points out, they would still be fine. Anyway, and associated game add-ons. More importantly, these users generated estimated annual platform spending of around X billion on hardware, peripherals, subscriptions, games, and other PlayStation services. They're fudging the numbers a little bit here. They're saying like, because we have Call of Duty, they're buying PlayStation 5, they're buying headsets, they're doing subscriptions, they're doing games. That's true for about 2%? Like, what's your conversion rate on something like that? I feel like this is fudging the numbers a little bit here. This represents around blank % of total spending on hardware, peripherals, subscriptions, games, and other PlayStation services. But you don't know that they bought those things because of Call of Duty. They likely bought those things because they're a fan of PlayStation, period. You don't just, yes, one game can move a console, but I find it a little misleading to say every Call of Duty player, or even what's their percentage, right? Are they saying half of the Call of Duty people bought the PlayStation because of Call of Duty? Who knows? Call of Duty is not replicable. Call of Duty is too entrenched for any rival, no matter how well equipped, to catch up. This sounds like excuses to me. But are they right, is the question that I put. It has been the top-selling game for almost every year in the last decade in the first-person shooter genre. It is overwhelmingly the top-selling game. Other publishers do not have the resources or expertise to match its success. Look, I'm sure Halo Infinite is bringing in revenue, even though that game's considered not great by a lot of people in the FPS genre. There's Apex Legends, which is a huge success. Sorry. There's Fortnite, which is a free-to-play. Conveniently, they don't mention that one. They mention Battlefield, which is struggling right now and is developed by EA. They mentioned Star Wars Battlefront, and they mentioned FIFA. They don't mention the mega hits like Fortnite, Apex, etc. It's funny that they mention EA's Battlefield and not EA's Apex Legends, which is a massive success, right? Ignoring these facts, Microsoft argues that Nintendo has been successful without access to Call of Duty. That misses the point. The point is, what point does it miss exactly? This is them again deflecting, and I find it really funny. We're like, that, yeah, Nintendo didn't have it, but that's not the point that we're trying to make. The decision identifies a wide body of evidence showing that Nintendo offers a differentiated experience to Xbox and PlayStation because it is focused on family-friendly games that are very different Peggy 18 FPS games like Call of Duty. This is supported by Microsoft's internal documents, which the CMA found show that in general, Microsoft's internal documents track PlayStation more. Anyway, they're saying that we don't want to be like Nintendo. Microsoft claims that Nintendo's differentiated model demonstrates that PlayStation does not need Call of Duty to compete effectively, but they're still giving it to you for 10 years, guaranteed in writing. But this reveals Microsoft's true strategy. Microsoft wants PlayStation. This is crazy. Microsoft wants PlayStation to become like Nintendo. Hugely successful. Jeff Grubb had a great tweet about this, and I had to laugh when I read this. Incredibly profitable for decades. Like, what point were they trying to make there when you're comparing yourself to like the most profitable company that's been releasing the same hardware for years? I don't see the problem there if that's what were to happen to Sony. Oh, have a huge success by staying on the PlayStation 5? Like, Microsoft wants PlayStation to become like Nintendo so that it would be a less close and less effective competitor to Xbox. That sounds like you would have to figure that out for yourself, Sony, if this were to go through. Post-transaction, Xbox will become the one-stop shop for all the best-selling shooter franchises on console. Call of Duty, Halo, Gears, Doom, Overwatch. That's very nice of you to say that Gears is on that list. As the decision explains, and it would then be free from serious competitive pressure. What about your games? Like, that's just absolute nonsense. You have so many franchises that you just gave up on. You gave up on Killzone, you gave up on Infamous, and those are just a few off the top of my head. There's plenty more. You've made this heavy investment in From Software. There would still be competitive pressure for sure. Microsoft has not committed to continue making Call of Duty available on PlayStation and PlayStation Plus. They did offer it to you for 10 years, and they do not need to offer it for you on PlayStation Plus. I would not expect that deal to ever transpire, actually. All right. Again, we're at the 16-minute mark, so we're going to go to a part 3. I don't want to go too crazy long. Let's read this last one because it's tied to what we were just discussing. Multi-game subscription services. Microsoft has not agreed to make Call of Duty and other Activision titles available on SIE's PlayStation Plus, much less on terms that would be fair and competitive. On the contrary, they have made clear publicly that they intend to make Call of Duty available only on Game Pass and have said that if SIE is concerned, it should permit Game Pass on PlayStation consoles. Look, that doesn't make it impossible for Sony to compete. Yes, okay, it's on Game Pass. Who cares? Figure out a competitive angle for your own properties. Call of Duty won't be on PlayStation Plus. Maybe that's the consent decree that they're going for. But anyway, I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to have to take a little bit of a break. I don't really want to do more than 3 parts. So part 3 will be the last for this series. We're nearing the end. We're on point 17 of 40, but the next one we'll go through the rest of it. And we'll start with a slip up where they kind of revealed when the PlayStation 6 might launch. So we'll get into that soon. Thanks so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell to know when my content goes live. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you want to become a member, you can become a member. And thank you to all of these fine people who support the channel. You can do so by clicking that join button. It's right down there. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I'm going to get out of here, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye for now.